Hey everybody. Hi, it's Cami. How's everybody doing? Okay, I am super super excited about this. I just finished my latest fan fiction story called Nathan's Vigil about 10 minutes ago. I typed up the last line and I raised my hands above my head and I said, "I'm done." And I couldn't wait another moment to share it with all of you. And so, welcome to Nathan's Vigil. So, just for context, if you're watching this another time, I wrote this story. It was first thought up at the end of season 3. That's when I first got the idea. And then before it could come to fruition, Jack died. And so I had to take a different turn. And then before the decision was made, I was writing it with Nathan. And then she chose Lucas. And so then I tried writing it with Lucas. And I wasn't taking the time. It wasn't coming together in my head the way I wanted it to. And so I kept putting it off and putting it off. And then and now I've just finished it. I finished it between season 11, episodes 9 and 10. So that's when I finished it. The events are probably not going to match up perfectly because I don't know what's going to happen in episode 10 yet, but that's when I finished it. So that's where it takes place. All right, enjoy. Why? Nathan whispered to the dim and empty room as his vision blurred with unshed tears. Why this? Why now? Nathan gently picked up Elizabeth's hand, the same hand that had taken hold of his when she'd asked him to dance, the same hand he had cradled against his chest as they had gently swayed across the floor of the Queen of Hearts, the same hand that sent the charge of a lightning bolt straight to his heart every time it brushed his, now lay limp and immobile in his grasp. Nathan finally let his gaze fall upon Elizabeth's face. 2 tears escaped his left eye, one tracing a trail for the other down his cheek, and splattered on his wrist. The sensation startled him from the memories and returned him to the awful present. Nathan took a deep breath as he dared to stretch out his left hand to gently stroke Elizabeth's cheek with the back of his trembling fingers. A sob escaped his chest at the bitter sweetness of finally touching her face, something he'd ached to do for years now. But the experience was marred by the cuts and bruises spread over Elizabeth's once beautiful skin. "You're still beautiful to me," he whispered. There was no reply. Elizabeth's eyes remained closed, unable to open. Nathan longed to see those captivating eyes flutter open, to watch with fascination as they transitioned from disoriented to smiling when they rested on him. "Friends don't look at friends this way," she had declared to him. But she couldn't look at him now. He wouldn't see her eyes regard him in that enchanting way again. Not unless she woke from the coma. The thought gave Nathan's hand momentum, and he began combing his fingers through Elizabeth's hair, marveling at its softness given all she'd been through. He couldn't help but smile at the memory of his breath being taken away at the first sight of her in short hair. His smile faded, and his eyes filled with tears again, as he wondered if there was a chance in the future for him to ask her to grow it out again. His hand drifted from her locks of hair back to her face, cupping her cheek. Oh, the sweet agony of being this close to her, touching her this way without timidity or hesitation. But the irony of her not being conscious to hear and feel his love for her tore at his heart. Nathan had dreamed of this moment for years. He had planned to tell her everything as soon as she had returned from Union City. Now he might never have that chance, and it was his fault. That thought triggered something deep festering inside. Hot tears streamed down Nathan's face faster and faster, scalding his cheeks. Then the dam was broken. Nathan clasped Elizabeth's hand in both of his and wept without restraint, grateful to be alone in the clinic. If this was the end, he didn't think he could go on. How would he live without her? How could he bear losing her when he was so close? Had he waited too long to fulfill his dream of taking her in his arms, pressing his lips to her, and confessing that he still loved her? Nathan took a shuddering, sobering breath, bowed his head over their hands, and began to pray with everything that was in him. Please, God, he pleaded, please don't take her. Not now. Not when she was almost mine. The sound of the door opening caused Nathan to snap his head to attention and shove the tears away with the heel of his free hand. He turned around to see Molly tentatively peek her head in, leading little Jack by the hand. Her face and voice were full of empathetic understanding as she said, "Sorry to interrupt." She smiled down at the little boy holding her hand. "But somebody wanted to come visit his mama." "I sure did. I'm going to help her get better." Nathan couldn't help but smile at the child's innocence and optimism, but the sight of him caused another twinge of guilt to squeeze Nathan's heart. How could he forget that he had inadvertently taken this child's father from him, and now it was possible he would be the cause the boy's mother would die too? Nathan shook his head to rid himself of the thought. He couldn't think about that now. He had to concentrate on being here for little Jack. Act now, react later, he told himself. He discreetly covered more of Elizabeth's body with her blanket so her wounds were less visible, and held out a hand to his favorite junior Mountie. "I know you will. You want to come sit with me?" "Yeah!" Jack sprinted the short distance and jumped into Nathan's lap. Molly smiled and slipped out to give them some privacy. Jack gave Nathan a quick hug as he got comfortable in his lap, then tried to hand a brightly colored paper to his mother. "Hi, Mama. Auntie Rosemary helped me make this card for you." When she remained motionless, that was when Jack suddenly noticed the discoloration on his mother's face. And his bright smile melted into concern as he searched Nathan's eyes for answers. "Why won't she talk to me? Why does her face look so hurt?" Nathan squeezed his eyes shut and winced. This was the part he had dreaded. He was going to have to relive all the terrible events of the last 2 days, the events that played over and over in his head like a reoccurring nightmare. He remembered every horrid detail. 2 days, that's all. Then I'll be back. The morning sun lit up Elizabeth's face as she flashed her adorable smile, her hands going through the familiar motions of saddling Sergeant. Nathan smiled back, knowing he was going to lose this argument. "I'd still feel better if I went with you," Nathan admitted. "That rum runner, Casimir Shaw, he's rumored to be making his way north. He's most likely past the border." "It's only Union City. I seriously doubt he's made it that far in such a short time. Besides, I'll be surrounded by people." "Why are you going again?" Elizabeth's hands paused. She looked at him with her pay-attention teacher face, but giggled before he got too nervous. "You don't remember? The new superintendent of schools, Mr. Cochran, wants to meet with as many teachers as he can to get the ball rolling for next school year. So he asked all the teachers who could make it to Union City to meet him there for a 2-day conference." She took the 2 steps between them to close the distance, her eyes never leaving his, her smile widening. "And thanks to you," she added in a private tone, "I'll be safer than ever with no Thomas Higgins around to give me any trouble." Nathan Nathan sighed happily and looked down at this wonderful woman with whom he was still completely smitten. When she looked at him that way, he could deny her nothing or be contrary to her wishes. Things were progressing slowly but nicely between the two of them. He was fairly certain she had romantic feelings for him, and heaven knows his feelings for her never left. He was going to tell her today until she announced her trip. Of course, he'd immediately offered to go with her, not only for her safety, but a horseback ride to another town would give him plenty of time to express himself to a captive audience with few distractions. But Elizabeth, with all her endearing independence, had insisted he was needed here in Hope Valley, and she couldn't selfishly take him away. So, instead of arguing with her, he gently took hold of her upper arms and said, "When you get back, we'll go for another ride together." "Then I'll have something to look forward to," she replied softly, her gaze deepening. "Kiss her," his heart urged him. "It's the perfect time." "No," he mentally retorted. "Not here in the middle of the street." He could have answered her in so many ways. He settled for a tender squeeze of her arms and a reassuring, "Yes, you will." Florence walked by at that moment, eyeing them mischievously. The spell was broken, and the two stepped back, simultaneously clearing their throats. Then they laughed together. Elizabeth walked over to Sargent. Nathan followed her and helped her mount. He momentarily hesitated, a slight fear nagging his protective instinct. Should he let her go alone? He didn't want to. "Stop being paranoid," his brain scolded him. He shook off the feelings, handed her the reins, and winked. But he couldn't hold back a cautious, "Be safe." Her smile brightened and she nodded. Then she galloped off. Wednesday afternoon was dragging by. "She'll be home soon," Nathan consoled himself, reaching for the third report in his pile of paperwork. He sighed, trying to convince himself to concentrate, when suddenly he heard Scout's low growl. He looked at the dog to see his head erect, his ears turned toward the street, his body ready to pounce. Nathan became suddenly alert, tuning his ears to whatever sounds he could hear. He did hear something, but not well. What was that? Then he heard it very clearly. A man's voice repeatedly yelling the same thing in an alarmed tone. "Help! This woman needs help!" Nathan sprang into action, grabbed his weapon, and bolted out the door. But when he reached the street, he stopped dead in his tracks, the blood drained from his face. The woman was Elizabeth. She was covered in dirt and blood and unconscious in this man's arms. Nathan shook himself and ran to the stranger. "What happened?" he demanded. "She was robbed. It happened between here and Union City. I think she hit her head on a rock." "Act now, react later," Nathan reminded himself. "I'll take her," he insisted. As the stranger gently handed her over, Nathan took a deep breath to keep his emotions in check. He couldn't help but think how this fantasy he'd held onto of carrying Elizabeth in his arms had taken a horribly twisted turn. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Nathan ran as carefully as he could and kicked open the clinic door. Faith and Molly spun around, Faith almost dropping her clipboard. Nathan's package immediately registered, and the horror on their faces was almost as instant. "Lay her here," Faith directed, pointing to the closest bed. Nathan did so. "What happened?" she demanded in almost an identical tone to Nathan's. The stranger repeated what he'd told Nathan, then added a few details that aroused Nathan's suspicions. "All right, I'll do everything I can. You two need to leave. Molly." Faith pointed to the screen, and Molly immediately pulled it in front of the men. As they exited, the stranger was nervously turning his hat in his hands and trying not to look Nathan in the eye. "Act now, react later," Nathan repeated in his head. Now was the time to get to the bottom of this. "Apparently, you and I need to talk," Do you agree? The stranger bobbed a nod and followed Nathan to his office. Have a seat, Nathan offered, sat himself down, and grabbed a pad and pencil. So, he began, trying to remain calm, what more do I need to know? My name's Brady. Then he paused. When he didn't say any more, Nathan asked, Just Brady? My first name is Albert. Never cared for it much, so I go by Brady. Okay, Brady. I'm Constable Grant, and as interesting as this is, I think we need to move past pleasantries, don't you think? Fair enough. Brady started fidgeting with his hat again, obviously nervous. I worked for Casimir Shaw. Alarm bells sounded in Nathan's head as he was writing. The Chicago rum runner. That's right. Well, occasionally, we, the gang, would hold people up to tide us over in between jobs. We never hurt anyone or nothing, he was quick to add when Nathan looked up from his notes. Except this last time. After we took the lady's purse, we were going to leave and let her be on her way. But she fought back. He started talking faster the closer he got to the actual incident, obviously upset. Before I knew it, Shaw hit her in the face with the butt of his rifle. She fell off her horse and hit her head on a rock. Brady took a deep breath before continuing. Shaw told us to head out. Everyone else left. I'm pretty sure she got kicked a time or two by the horses when they took off. I almost went with them, but I couldn't just leave her there. He's never hurt anyone before, much less a woman, and I guess it shook me. She managed to say Hope Valley before she passed out, so I brought her here. I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen. Nathan was very glad that he'd learned long ago to keep a good poker face while questioning a suspect, because he would have crumbled by now without that skill. He inhaled deeply and said as calmly as he could, While I appreciate you giving me all this information, and it is very valuable, I'm still going to have to lock you up. I understand, Constable. I actually want you to. I feel safer that way, Brady acquiesced. He walked to the cell and waited for Nathan to unlock it before stepping in voluntarily and settling on the bed. Nathan was about to shut and lock the door, but something stopped him, and he turned to face Brady. I want you to know that I really appreciate all of this. The information, turning yourself in, bringing her home. You probably saved her life, and I won't forget that when it counts. Thanks, Constable. Then a new thought occurred to Brady. She's your girl, isn't she? Nathan looked surprised. He started to question, how did you... Well, that remains to be seen. Suddenly, Faith burst in. Nathan, she called urgently. She's pretty bad. We can't move her, and there's no time anyway. I'm going to have to operate. Mountie Nathan? Jack asked. Did you hear me? Nathan pushed the memories away again and did his very best to answer the little boy in terms he would understand. Your mama's in a very deep sleep, Jack. A very bad man hurt her when he tried to take her money. She needed surgery, and Dr. Carter always puts her patients to sleep so they won't feel it. Now we're just waiting for her to wake up from the operation. But Mrs. Sullivan said her operation was yesterday. Why isn't she awake yet? A realization came over Jack. She's really hurt, isn't she? Fresh tears pooled in Nathan's eyes as he answered, Yes, Jack, she is. Mama said that Daddy died because he got really hurt and couldn't get fixed. Is Mama going to die and be with Daddy in heaven? The question struck Nathan like a slap in the face. Is that what she wanted? Maybe she would prefer to go be with Jack. The thought was more than he could bear. Act now, react later, he thought for the 100th time. Now to answer the child truthfully, but with respect for his father. I honestly don't know, Jack. I don't want her to, because I sure would miss her, and I know you would too. Jack started to sniffle, and Nathan had to really try hard to press on. But if it does happen, your mama and daddy will love you and watch over you always. And there are lots of people here in Hope Valley to take care of you. I promise you that. Tears fell from Jack's face and landed in his lap. He threw his arms around Nathan's neck and hugged him tightly. I love you, Mountie Nathan. Nathan's own tears splashed on Jack's sleeve as he engulfed his small body to return the hug. I love you, Jack. Jack relaxed his hold and settled back in Nathan's lap, eyes on his mother. Did the Mounties catch the bad man? Not yet. When will that happen? Nathan sat up straighter, filled with new resolve. I don't know, but I'm going to start right now. He lifted Jack off his lap and patted his back. You go on outside, and I'll be right there to take you to Aunt Rosemary and Uncle Lee's. Jack nodded and walked out the door. The moment the door was closed, Nathan faced Elizabeth again and took her hand. Liv, please, he pleaded in a determined voice. You have to live. There's so much I need to say. He stood and bent to place his face close to hers. I'm going to catch this guy. I promise. He gently brushed his lips over her forehead. Fight, please. He touched her cheek one more time, then tore himself away. He was going to take Jack to the Coulters, then he was going to have another chat with Brady. 3 days later. Nathan rode into town tall and proud, feeling very tired, but accomplished and sore. Newton was pretty weary too, judging by the way he ambled along the dirt road. It had been a grueling few days of investigating and harvesting all of Brady's knowledge, traveling to Cape Fullerton, rounding up a squad of Mounties for backup, tracking down and rounding up Casimir Shaw's gang, then putting Brady and 2 Mountie guards on a train to Capital City to negotiate an appropriate plea deal. But it had all happened. It was all behind him. He probably could have gone home and slept for a week if he wasn't so anxious to get back to Elizabeth. He looked longingly at the clinic as he passed, but he knew he had to see to Newton's needs and get cleaned up before continuing his bedside vigil. He took a quick look around, remembering he still had a job in Hope Valley and wanted to see that everything was running smoothly in his absence. Then he saw Bill coming out of the cafe and halted Newton. Nathan, you're back, Bill greeted him enthusiastically. I am, and Casimir Shaw is right where we want him, behind bars. That's a relief. You look like you could use some rest. Or maybe a visit to the clinic, Bill added with sympathy. How is she? Nathan dared to inquire. Last I checked, still not awake. That Casimir Shaw must have really gotten her good. Why don't you go home, freshen up, then head over? You don't need me? Nah, the paperwork can wait, and everyone knows where to find me if there's trouble when you're not around. He smiled, letting his soft side for Elizabeth shine through for just a moment. Then he tossed his hand in the air and said gruffly, Go on, get out of here. Feeling renewed motivation, Nathan trotted Newt to the stables and jumped down. Ben, the 10-year-old boy who was trying to earn enough money for his own baseball mitt by caring for the horses, walked right up to him. Can I take care of Newt for you, Mountie Nathan? You sure can, Ben. I'm in a huge hurry. Nathan dug into his pocket for an appropriate tip. He pulled out 2 quarters, a little more than he would usually pay, but this occasion was worth every cent. He happily handed it over. Here you go. Wow, 50 cents! That's the biggest tip I ever got. Thanks, Mountie Nathan. You're welcome. Take good care of him, he called over his shoulder as he ran home. He raced up the steps and rushed through the door. There was Allie, reading. I thought you were staying with the Canfields. I am. I just came home for a while so Angela could do an errand with her mom. She offered a tentative smile, as if checking to see if their mutual hurt feelings had been mended. I'm really glad you made it home. At the first hint of her relief, Nathan smiled and scooped her up in his arms to twirl her around, ignoring his sore ribs. So am I, Allie. I missed you so much. Then he remembered all the dirt and sweat caked on him. Oh, sorry, he said while brushing at her arms. I'm a mess. It's okay. Dad? She paused, then took a deep breath before continuing. Just like I do, Nathan thought with a smile. I want you to know that I know you're an amazing person. That, and I'm so lucky to have you for my dad. I wouldn't have it any other way. Nathan felt his chest swell with pride and his eyes fill with happy tears. He bent down, kissed her cheek, and declared, I'm the lucky one to have you for a daughter. Allie sighed happily, then looked at his clothes with adolescent eyes. Why don't you get cleaned up? Mischief crept into her eyes, and she added, Then I bet you want to go to the clinic. That's what everybody kept saying, he thought. Nathan let out a self-conscious chuckle. She knew him too well. Yeah, I think I will. Why don't you head back to the Canfields when they're back, since I don't know when I'll be home. I'll come by for you later and we can talk about this some more. Okay. Allie headed for the door as Nathan headed for the stairs. Dad? He stopped mid-step. I love you. I love you, Allie. She smiled contentedly as she walked out the door. Nathan went through the motions of getting washed up and putting on fresh clothes. Then he sprinted toward the clinic, not wanting to be away from Elizabeth for another moment. He rushed through the door and was met with Faith's smile. You've been rushing through my door a lot lately, she teased. Welcome back. Thanks, he replied. Then his eyes were drawn to Elizabeth, and he crossed the room as though being drawn by a magnet. How is she, Faith? Better. Faith sighed, and Nathan heard immense relief in her voice. It was scary there for a while. I didn't know if I'd be able to stop her internal bleeding. I'm not a surgeon. Using several things I learned from Carson and a lot of divine intervention, it finally stopped. Her body's healing well. We just need her to wake up now. Faith paused, and Nathan could feel her taking in the sight of him, carefully taking Elizabeth's hand. She tapped her clipboard with her pen, laid it on the desk, and made a gracious exit, mentioning that she was going to get some dinner. Faith, he called before she made it out the door. She turned back and met his eyes. You saved her life. I don't know how I can ever thank you. Just please know how grateful I am. I do, she replied kindly and left quietly. Nathan cradled Elizabeth's hand in both of his, assessing her progress. Her cuts were healing, and many of the bruises had begun to fade. He began to talk to her, hoping that hearing his voice would be the final step to pull her into consciousness. Elizabeth, I caught him. I caught Casimir Shaw. He's going away for a long time, and he won't hurt anyone else. He sighed. The silence was causing the events of the last several days to catch up to him. That and I'm just sorry he hurt you before I could catch him. If you don't make it through this, I'll never forgive myself. He pushed through his soreness and scooted the chair closer to her bed and whispered near her ear, Please get through this. Please don't leave me. Please. Suddenly he felt a weak squeeze on his hands. He gasped quietly. His eyes darted to their hands, then back to her face. Elizabeth? Elizabeth's head tilted ever so slightly toward him. Elizabeth? Elizabeth, come on. Please. Elizabeth moaned slightly, her brow furrowed in pain at any movement. That's it. That's it. You can do it. A hopeful smile spread across his face, and his voice became husky. Please come back to me. Nathan? Elizabeth feebly whispered, putting great effort into opening her eyes. I can't. Nathan kept hold of her left hand in his and lightly placed his right hand on her head, stroking her hair. It's okay. Take your time. Elizabeth put her own right hand to her head and grunted softly. Oof, I think I hit my head. Nathan laughed quietly. Yeah, you did. Then Nathan realized their hands were resting on one another, but rather than back away, he leaned in closer. You were mugged by Casimir Shaw, the rum runner. Oh, I remember now. Elizabeth rolled her eyes, then groaned at the pain it caused. I tried to take it back. I must have fallen off Sergeant. Her eyes widened and she momentarily tried to sit up. Is he all right? Nathan put gentle pressure on her shoulders and laid her back down. Not hard, since she couldn't move well. Hold on there. Sergeant's fine. I found him about an hour from here and brought him home. He was just fine. And is Jack okay? He sure is. He misses you, but Rosemary and Lee have taken really good care of him. I've been checking on him every day, and Allie and Bill did while I was away. Where did you go? I tracked down Casimir Shaw and threw him in jail. Elizabeth furrowed her brow in question. By yourself? Nathan chuckled humbly. Well, no, I had help. One of his gang defected after your incident. He actually brought you home. But he helped me track Shaw to Cape Fullerton. Then I went to Mountie headquarters there and rounded up a squad to go to the Irish pub where they go to drink every night. A few of them tried to escape out the back, but I was waiting there with a few others. Shaw got me pretty good once in the ribs. He momentarily rubbed his ribs. But then I got him square in the jaw, more than once. He traced her jaw delicately with his thumb, his eyes never leaving hers. I had to get him back for hitting yours. Anyway, they're in jail, and they're not getting out for a very long time. Elizabeth reached her hand out and let it rest on Nathan's cheek. Nathan sucked in his breath. She had never touched him this way, and the glow in her eyes was unmistakable. My hero, she murmured. You investigated a crime. You caught a gang of notorious criminals, in a fight no less. You took care of my son. You brought my horse home. And you saved me. Nathan rested his elbow on her bed and covered her hand with his. But I didn't, he whispered harshly, beginning to cry. I didn't save you. If I had just gone with you, you wouldn't have gotten hurt. He lowered his eyes in shame, and the tears continued to fall. I almost caused your son to lose his mother after causing him to lose his father. Hold on there, she interrupted in a surprisingly firm voice. Look at me, please. He reluctantly obeyed. I made the choice to go on my own, and you let me make that choice, even if you didn't agree. You had no way of knowing a dangerous rum runner from Chicago would just happen to be in the area the exact day I made a trip. She joked, You don't have that much power. Then her tone turned serious and reverent. As for the other, Nathan, it's not your fault Jack died. It was just a matter of coincidence. And since I don't really believe in them, I trust that it was God's plan for him. It's true, I was angry, but I've forgiven you. It's time for you to forgive yourself. Nathan closed his eyes, letting Elizabeth's words heal his soul like a soothing balm. He opened his eyes to gaze at her and finally gave in to an impulse. He pressed his lips to the palm of her hand resting at his cheek. She smiled, and his heart did a somersault. He couldn't hold back the words. What an incredible woman you are. Incredible, beautiful. He took her hand in both of his again as the tears came harder. Oh, Elizabeth, I almost lost you. I couldn't bear the thought of you not being here, not seeing you every day, not ever telling you. What, Nathan? She asked patiently, after a silence. Suddenly he wanted to be closer to her, even closer than he was. Act now, react now, he said to himself. He gently maneuvered her head so he was cradling it in his right arm and touched her face with his left hand. He felt her hand rest on his arm. She looked completely at home in his arms. Not ever telling you exactly how I feel about you. Almost losing you has made me realize how precious life is. I've let silly things, insecurities, arguments, misunderstandings, all that, I've let it get in the way. But I'm not going to let another moment go by without saying. He took a deep breath, and his voice turned gravelly. That I love you. I love you, Elizabeth Thatcher Thornton. I love you more than life. With that, he knew what to do next. His heart beat wildly in his chest, but nothing could hold him back this time. He watched her eyes. They were only filled with warmth. So he closed his own eyes and gently touched his lip to hers, not wanting to hurt her. But it was as if his kiss gave her strength. He heard her moan with pleasure and felt her kiss him deeper. Nathan felt her hand in his hair, and he thought he would die from the ecstasy. He was finally holding the woman he loved. He had finally told her his feelings were unchanged, and he had experienced the pure, breathtaking joy of kissing her. Their kiss was soft and meek so as not to cause her any pain, but it was lengthy and warm, full of promise and passion that had been locked away too long. He finally pulled back, feeling nothing less than euphoric. He dazedly opened his eyes in time to see Elizabeth's eyes flutter open dreamily. Nathan, she whispered huskily. Oh, Nathan, I love you. I love you so much. He exhaled as he put his arms around her completely in a careful hug. They had a long, healing road to travel, but it didn't matter. Now he was at peace. Now he was at home. Nothing had ever felt more right. Will you always love me? She asked. Always, he said. Okay, that is the end. I hope that you have enjoyed this because I really did. It's just so exciting that I finally finished it. So, have a great morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in your day. Enjoy the episode that is coming up next, wherever you are watching and whenever you are watching this. And I will see you next time. Bye, guys.